Hello, and welcome to Guys Dealings with Feelings, the podcast dedicated to addressing men's mental health issues and providing practical solutions. My journey has been profoundly shaped by the loss of my son, and through this experience, I've gained valuable insights. I'm here to share what I've learned and continue to discover along the way. Today, we're going to have a special guest, and I'm super pumped about it. I'm so happy to have Thomas Brown on today. He's a mental health advocate, artist, author, and podcaster. After losing his brother to suicide, Thomas rode across the country on a bicycle to raise awareness for suicide. Thomas has his own trauma, and today he is going to share some of his story and some of the tools that he used to get through losing his brother. Thomas, thank you so much for being here today.
Aaron, thank you so much. I'm super grateful for the opportunity to sit here and share my story with your audience.
Yeah, man. So, like I said, you lost your brother to suicide, and I'm not looking for any details about that other than leading up to um, where were you in life, right after where were you in life, and then kind of take us on through the idea behind, I think it was 7,000 plus miles on a bicycle.
Yeah, we didn't do a straight line. Where I was in life right before my brother took his life, I was 24 years old, super confused, lost. I had passion and I knew that there was things that I wanted to do, but I feel like when it comes to mental health, my cross to bear was codependency. I was terrified of being alone. I was terrified of having to go on my own kind of like journey of self-discovery, or even like in order to learn and hopefully become a master of a certain craft. I was afraid to do that. Yeah, like I would say that like when I lost my brother, that like that wasn't something that put me in a tailspin. It was kind of like the last drop of the bucket, and I became overwhelmed emotionally. I was already a lost individual, and to lose somebody as influential, both for positive and negative reasons, in my life as my older brother was devastating. My parents, watching them go through the entire struggle was is probably like one of the most painful things that I ever had to see, because you see somebody that you love, somebody that has taken care of you your entire life, and you just wish you could do something, say something that would alleviate some of the pain. But there's nothing you can do when you lose somebody. Um, I don't have children, so I'll never know what it's like to lose a child. But the look of devastation in my parents' eyes and the way that they shifted after that. My brother died on August 20th, and for the last 20 plus years, every month on the 20th, my parents are somber. So it's not just like the annual anniversary. It's every month on the 20th. They just would like go over it over and over again. My mom was the one that found my brother, so I could see that having even more of an effect on her. But she was like a super strong woman. I always wanted to be able to just try to like keep the family together. And that's the one thing that did, even though I didn't have the ability to do that, we did as a unit kind of come together a little bit more. My brother was kind of like the golden child of the group. He could do no wrong, even though he was kind of, he could be a tyrant at the same time. He was more of the patriarchal leader of the family than even my father was. He's just had that kind of like a big personality.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I think that's where a lot of the conflict came in between him and I, was just like me, like, dude, you're not my dad. Like, shut up, get out of here. But there was much more of a connection between me, my mom, and my dad after my brother's death. Like, we knew that like we were all that we had, and that we had to communicate with each other. We had to be open with each other. So that was like a plus that kind of came out of that. For me personally, it took me about 6 years after my brother's death before I found myself in therapy. And that was, I was lucky. I found I always say that like therapy is almost like dating. You have to try a few therapists out before you find one that you match with.
Sure.
And I was lucky. I found one right out the gate, and she did a masterful job of guiding me through as I tore the onion of my personality, like layer by layer by layer by layer by layer, to really get to
Mm.
the idea of like who I was as an individual and what I really want, why I do the things that I do, why I respond to certain emotions, why I respond to certain events, and how to grow. And I really think it was under Kim's tutelage that was one of the she was kind of like the fuel that helped me to get going on the bike ride, where I would say my friend Zach, the guy that I did the bike ride with, he was kind of the match. So before I had like my second existential breakdown, which led me to finding therapy, I went and walked across the country with my parents' church. I'm not a Christian, and but like my parents' church was super, super progressive, and I resonated with the ideals in which they were walking across the country for. So they went from Phoenix to Washington, D.C. And at this point, I'd come out of my first existential crisis, and I was like, I need to do something with my life. I feel like I don't want to go to college right away, but I need to like do something. I need to like leave my environment and do something wild. So I went across the country. It was kind of like being in theology school on the road. Learned a lot of like stories from the
Yeah.
Bibles, but also like I helped with the creation of the documentary. I was like more of like the production assistant for a filmmaker that was following them. So I didn't have like an official walking title. I did walk with the walkers a lot, but with a camera on my shoulder. So it was a great experience.
Mm.
I'd always been into film and video production, so I got to like get away from my own community and go on an adventure. And it was this, like, I had family in Kansas, so this is the first time I had ever been east of the Mississippi, is going on this journey, let alone to almost to the East Coast. So I had this kind of like fire inside when I came back from
And that was
that was
before.
in
Sorry, that was
this was before therapy. So this is after my first
that,
existential crisis.
and this was before your brother passed.
No, this is after my brother passed. So my brother died in 2001. I
Had your
had
brother? Okay,
Yeah,
so
sorry. I'll give you a timeline. So my brother died in 2001. Uh, not having the greatest tools in my tool belt of dealing with like grief and trauma. I had my first existential crisis in 2004.
mm-hmm.
And then in 2006, I went out on this adventure, and I learned a lot about myself and like the things that I wanted. And so I was in the process of really like, I'd stepped away from some negative relationships, and I was out on my own a little bit more. And then I had another existential crisis in about 2007, 2008. And that's when I wandered in and found Kim. And I think she just helped me. She's like, before you can go forward with all this stuff that you want to do in life, you really have to like understand why you feel the way that you feel. So she really took me on a journey. And then in 2010, I met this guy named Zach. I was working for this after school program at this park that my brother had worked at before he died. And there was a tree outside that was in honor of my brother. And Zach was just filling in a shift. We had somebody that was out sick, and he was able to like cover that day. And we took a shine to one another, really appreciated, talked like a lot about music and books and stuff like that. So we like, hey man, let's like meet up one night and get some coffee. And so the first night, like when I met him, he was actually reading the third book in the Ishmael series by Daniel Quinn, and I was on the second book. He was
Mm-hmm.
reading my Ishmael, I was reading the story of B. So we started talking a lot about that. Ishmael, the story of Ishmael is like really about, even though it's a fictional story, it's about understanding your story, your personal story, the national story, and within the country that you're a part of, the cultural story, and understanding like the human story and where your story fits in on all that. So it's really like about self-awareness through the understanding of like a personal narrative. So Zach and I just like, we started going off and talking about that. And he's like, well, how did you come to this book? And I actually was introduced to the Ishmael series by my therapist, Kim. She thought it would be good for me, a book about a story about self-awareness in a very like fantastical way, knowing that I was like into film and television and movies and all that. So later on that night, after we were at like this coffee shop that was open till like midnight, Zach revealed to me that he lost his brother to suicide. Cause he's like, where did you find this book? I was like, oh, I was in therapy. He's like, why are you in therapy? And I told him about losing my brother. And so I talked about that for a while. And then like a few hours later, he's like, hey man, I got to tell you, I lost my brother to suicide. So it was like the first time I had ever met anybody outside of my family or outside of the realm of the influence of my brother, somebody that lost somebody to a loved one to suicide. And that I don't know, that just meant a lot. Knowing that there was somebody out there that like you can just give each other a look and like there's this automatic knowing of that weight that you both carry. So I had started dating this new this new woman. She was also she was really into photography, but she was also a pinup girl for the online organization Suicide Girls, which was like their way of being like this is an alternative form of beauty, piercings, tattoos, colored hair, and suicide girls to make it edgy. So I
Mm-hmm.
dubbed this woman and Zach my suicide friends as like just as a joke. Is that like Zach was a legitimate like so him and I had the same felt experience, and then this woman that I was dating, was a pinup girl online. She would do some shoots from time to time, and she had asked me if I would, being a photographer myself, if I would. They were going to be like a Phoenix Suicide Girls like community party where all the girls got together and like fans could show up and stuff, and they could like be at a bar and just like hang out and have a community gathering. She's like, can you do the event photography? I was like, sure. I ended up after an hour into this whole thing, I was just like, this isn't my scene, this is weird. Not I just don't like big bars and stuff like that. I need quiet. And so I called Zach and I was like, hey man, come hang out with me. I'm getting bored hiding behind my camera, taking pictures. And so he showed up and we were just hanging out and talking. And even though I had these like two new friends in my life that were very like a little bit more of a positive connection, there was something inside of me that like I needed to get out. I didn't want to just like be in Phoenix, and I wanted to like go do something. And so I told Zach about the walk across the country, and he's like, we should do something like that, but I don't want to walk. Like, let's ride bicycles. And I was like, well, you can cover more ground on a bicycle than you can on foot. So I like that idea. And we both talked about it. He's like, we should do it for our brothers. I was like, that's a brilliant idea. So he was kind of like the spark where Kim was the fuel. And we there at that moment we decided that we didn't know how we were going to do it, but someday we were going to do this ride. So two suicide loss survivors decided to go on a cross country bicycle ride for suicide awareness while attending a Suicide Girls community event. There was just something like some kind of like poetic synchronicity of all of
Little
that
irony.
was just, yeah, it was
Mm.
too much to like deny. So it took a while, took about 6 more months before we were like, okay, we're going to do it. Let's do this. And then another 13 months of planning, trying to raise money, getting sponsorships of any kinds from cycling organizations. We partnered with a local mental health crisis facility so that would give us a little bit more leeway when we were communicating with other people in other parts of the country. Like, hey, just so you know that we're not some weirdos that are saying we're riding for suicide awareness. This is the organization that is backing us and that they can vouch for us. So we had to do like cold calls. I called hundreds of different cities, the support groups, um, in over 100 different cities, just to try to like, hey, this is something that we're doing. We're planning on being in your town roughly like this night within these few days. Would you like to meet and talk about like our experiences, our similar experiences? Um, and it took 13 months to like really do all of that, just to like create a route, make sure that we had events scheduled so we could talk with the community. Some events we only had 6 people, other events we had like over 500 people. So
Wow.
yeah, it was wild. And we were, it was just a really powerful experience because it also showed me like what I was capable of organizing. Like that was just something that
Mm-hmm.
like Zach took care of, he was more of a cyclist at that time than I was. So he kind of like did the research on the bikes where I like did everything else. Like I did the website, I had to do all the cold calls. It was just like a little bit more, I had a little bit more of experience in that realm, but it was heavy. It was a lot of work before we even got on the bike to pedal. And,
Sure, I bet.
and here's the stupidest thing of this entire endeavor is that, like, I worked with all the phone calls that I had to make. The further across the country you got to get up and early in the morning and start making those phone calls so that you hit them at 9 in the morning. So like a lot of times on the East Coast, I'm getting up and I'm making phone calls at 6 in the morning, and then I have to be at work at 2 o'clock for the after school program. So, and I worked about 10 miles away. So I would ride my bike to work and then work for 6 hours and then ride my bike home. I didn't really have enough time to work my body up to doing like 50, 60, 70 miles. So the first time I had ever ridden my bike 50 plus miles was the first day of the bike tour
Wow.
in San Francisco, which is just a massive, like just hills on top of hills on top of hills,
Right. Right.
in like the pouring rain. So, and in Phoenix, like we get monsoons every once in a while, but like we don't get a lot of experience of like of rain out here. And I just remember that first day, all the excitement, all of like the anxiety, the adrenaline, and just learning how to pace yourself on that day, like with all of that extra emotion that was just on top of it too. So it was wild. Like the entire experience, organizing it and doing it is, it still has a massive effect on me up to this day. So I
Well,
don't know if
that's
that
awesome.
answers your question.
Yeah, it totally answers the question. And the follow up to the bike ride, the bike ride itself, was did you kind of put, now I can imagine, and we'll discuss this, the mental part that went with pushing through riding a bike so far, especially since you had no prior real training to do so. But did you have, was it just to raise awareness across the country about suicide? Was that the
Yeah.
goal? And,
That was the
and
goal.
how many
It
meetings
was
you end up having?
Well, it was more of like once we got going, because we're still making phone calls and organizing stuff with people while we're on the bike ride. There are some
Mm,
people that like promise things and then like it just never happened. And then there was other people that were like really really involved. And what a lot of the crisis centers would do is that they would use our bike ride as a gimmick. If I would have like had this idea in the beginning, it probably would have reached more ears. But what I mean by like they used our bike ride as a gimmick is that like, hey, we're going to use your bike ride, the fantastical nature of you guys riding as far as you're riding, to advertise to our community and to try to get and to advertise to television, local TV, local newspapers, or regional newspapers, so that people can come out, interview you. But part of that story will also be the resources in that community. So it was a way
mm,
to like, they used our bike ride as a way to highlight the resources in each community, which was like a brilliant move on their part, because they got much more, they got more awareness out and about what they were doing in their towns, which is really important, because like,
sure.
hey, we're just like some traveling circus that's coming into town. Once we leave, like you have to know, like if you're inspired by what you're doing, that's cool, but like you now look at all the resources in your town and opportunities for you to volunteer or to help out in some way. And so really, like in the towns that took advantage of our bike ride, they really kind of like flourished for a few years with like extra volunteers and resources. So that was one thing that was positive from that. But yeah, our two main things that we were riding for, it was for the healing power of for suicide awareness and the healing power of art. We just felt like one of the places that we ended at, we were very intentional with where we began and where we ended. Zach and I first made a connection when we worked together about on talking about music, and then when we sat down and we met up, our connection deepened because of the same books that we were reading. So we just really felt that like art and creativity is not only something that like can bring people together in the things that they appreciate and love, but art is also something that as you as an artist or somebody that's trying to strengthen that creative muscle, that it can be another avenue of self-awareness for you getting to understand yourself through a creative outlet. So that was one of the reasons. That was another thing that we were trying to promote on the bike ride. And so, with that being said, we had very particular like intentions for our starting point and our destination. I don't know if you've ever seen the documentary The Bridge, but it's about all the people that have gone to the
Jump from
Golden
the
Gate Bridge and
yeah,
jumped to take their lives. So that's why we chose the Golden Gate Bridge and not just like, you know, the center of San Francisco. And we started on
sure,
the northern edge of the Golden Gate because we wanted to ride across it. And we stayed at the Coast Guard's base the night before because the Sausalito Coast Guard group at Fort Baker, one of their duties was body retrieval. So that was something that like they had to deal with a lot of people that like the people that had jumped from the bridge. So they were very very supportive of our mission. And when in that morning they drove us up to the top. They gave us medals, and like some people like took medals off of their uniforms and gave them to us. And
wow,
we started with 12 strangers that were all from the base. And as we set off to like ride, you know, everybody, we got pictures with everybody. We shook everybody's hand, gave hugs. And then when we went to go ride, like all of them stood in line and like saluted us on like this dark, gloomy, gray, rainy day. The place that we decided to end at was the Chapel of Sacred Mirrors. I don't know if you've ever listened to the band Tool, but the artist for their last 3 album covers, his name's Alex Gray. Visionary artist. It's kind of its own genre. Visionary artists experiment a lot with psychedelics, and their paintings are inspired by those visions. And Alex Gray is really like one of the first one that is outward about his experimentation with psychedelics. And him and his wife started an art retreat center in upstate New York called the Chapel of Sacred Mirrors. And
wow,
Alex had written a book called The Power of Art. And in there is kind of like the inspiration for why we used art as a mean to communicate the power of art in in our presentations and in our dialogues with other communities. It came from Alex and him saying how like, you know, witnessing art can make people happy and can raise the nervous system. Working with art can help you like process, you know, untapped emotional trauma. And I totally agree with everything that he says about being an artist, being a creative, or being an audience member. And so we wanted to end at the Chapel of Sacred Mirrors in upstate New York. So it kind of like became like almost like a pilgrimage too, at least for
hmm,
me to make my way there after being like such a fan of not only the band Tool, but of Alex's amazing, beautiful pieces of art. So when we started, we hadn't even made contact with them. I had called a few times, and you know, I apparently they get a lot of wild requests, so it's hard for them to take things seriously.
hmm,
And it wasn't until we had met a gentleman by the name of Brad Burge, who was the communications director for an organization called MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies. They're kind of like a think tank that like takes all the studies around the world and around the country and kind of like processes all of them. And so
hmm,
we met with him when we were in Santa Cruz. And he's like, "So you guys are going to the Chapel of Sacred Mirrors? That's a great place. I've been there myself." He's like, "Do they know that you made contact with them?" I was like, "No, we haven't. We're still trying. We'll keep calling." He's like, "You guys are crazy." He's like, "What do you expect to do?" I was like, "I don't know. We'll just get
hmm,
there, knock on the door, talk to some of the people that work there, and tell them what we did." And if there was a room there to rent, or if they knew of a place nearby, we could go. And he's like, you guys are nuts. He's like, I'm good friends with the Grays. I will send them an email and vouch for you. I was like, that's awesome. Thank you so much.
That is
So
awesome.
by the time we got back to Phoenix, we had had I received an email from Alex's wife, Allison, saying like, we got the email from Brad. We're really honored that you would choose our place. We're really inspired by your mission, and absolutely, you have a place to stay with us at the retreat center for a few days once you get done. And here is hospitality and co event organizer Sharon Stoluto. She'll be your contact from here on out. And then Sharon, I would email her once a month. Just, you guys haven't forgot about us, right? We're still on our way. We're in Oklahoma. We're in Florida. We're in Georgia. I do have to say this just to let people know. When we started the bike ride, we had every intention raising money to have a support vehicle with us and have somebody drive it. And that support vehicle driver would also kind of like be a camera operator, because I had an intention of doing a documentary about this. We did not raise enough money. So when we started the bike ride, we were literally, we were riding side by side with like 150-pound bikes, just and lived with everything, you know? And by the time we got to like LA, I had a few friends that came out that like lived in the area that kind of like acted as our support vehicle drivers. This is something that we did on the walk. So it was like the way that I wanted to organize it. And we decided once we got back to Phoenix is that like, look, we got 7,000 miles to go. If you're going in a straight line, that's from the Pacific to the Atlantic back to the Pacific. Like, we both don't have to ride our bikes 7,000 miles. We have to do it as a team. This is a team effort. And this is another example of showing the importance of community, is that like, you know, together we can get things accomplished. So I took my truck at the time, and what we did is that we rotated. Zach would drive and I would ride, and then we would flip and I would ride and Zach would ride. And we would do this like every other day. And it was important to do because if one of us got injured, that would screw up the entire schedule. If we had to stop for an extended amount of time because somebody was sick or somebody was injured, like that would throw the entire schedule off. For instance, in leaving Santa Fe, New Mexico, I got really ill, and I discovered that I had diverticulitis, and I wasn't able to ride my bike for a week because like my diet had to be completely restricted. Like I was drinking kefir and eating toast pretty much. So like like there's no way I could burn. There was no way for me to consume the amount of calories that I needed to consume, even with like protein drinks to do the amount of riding that we had to do. So Zach did that. And then in North Carolina, Zach, he had a tendency to like, if Zach and I, we were very similar to the tortoise and the hare. I'm the tortoise. I kind of like, hey, I'm on the bike and I just kind of like take my time, listen to my music, and I try to get into a rhythm. I'm not concerned with speed. I'm just concerned with getting it done. Zach would get on that bike and he would race. It didn't matter if he was riding 50 miles, 60 miles, 70 miles, 80 miles. Like, he's racing that entire time. He's trying to go as fast as he can the entire time. And by the time he got to North Carolina, like his back was just shot from like being hunched over. And so there was a few states where like we were taking him on our days off. We were taking him to get like massages and get worked on. And so it was a couple states before he was able to get back on the bike and go. And he finally, you know, it's like, okay, I'm going to go a little slow. I don't need to like go super fast. So, yeah, I don't want to. Like, some people kind of think that it might be cheating that we had a support vehicle, but we still did the mileage every single day. Yeah, it got to the point where like being on the bike was actually the escape, because you'd be having these like really intense conversations every single night, and the getting on the bike was the way to kind of like exercise any demons that you might have been possessed with from the night before.
So mind control is such a big part of recovery. So whether we're recovering, somebody's passed away, whatever it is, something traumatic has happened to us, and mind control is crucial, in my opinion, to kind of getting to the other side of
Mm-hmm.
of the puzzle and trying to master our emotions, trying to make sure that we're living in a state that we want to be in. And so, I'm covered in tattoos, and a lot of that has to do with pushing through the painful. I hate getting tattooed. It really hurts. But
I love
in
it.
the darkest day, yeah, in the darkest days after my son died, it was helpful. It was painful. You had to have the mind control. I didn't know what I was doing at the time, but you had to have the mind control to push through.
Mm-hmm.
You can't do a ton of tattooing if you can only put in an hour at a time.
Yeah.
So I did it that way, and then I found running later on, and it's about the same thing,
Yeah. Yeah.
except
Yeah.
for one lasts forever, and the other one just makes you sore for the rest of the day. So, uh, did you deal with that? Were you focusing on the mind control it took to push through? I mean, I've never ridden a bike 50 miles in a day or 80 miles a day. I mean, I can imagine what
I
that's
think
like,
the
but
the worst part about like cycling is getting used to the saddle sores.
yeah.
No doubt, like you just when your ass hurts, like that's like the worst thing. One thing, Kim was very good at teaching me different like meditation techniques, and the main one that she had really had me focus on was the breath. And my God, I played basketball when I was in high school, and I feel like any type of athlete, no matter what level it in, it doesn't matter if you're in like Pee Wee or something, and you're a little kid, or if you're in high school or college, like if the coaches are sincere about maximizing the effort of their athletes, they need to bring in somebody that will teach meditation and breath control. I remember like I was a starter in high school, and like the first 2 minutes of every single game, my I was panting, I was out of breath, and my tongue tasted like it felt like sandpaper because I didn't have any
Hmm.
breath control, and I was just like too pumped up on adrenaline. So I really feel like Kim helped me kind of like learn how to like be in touch with my body.
Hmm.
And I still learn that every single day, like new different levels of, as especially as I age, where aches and pains are. Getting in a rhythm is always a little bit difficult. Once you're in it, you're kind of like in it. And I used to run too a lot before I had back injuries, so that would be kind of like the same thing. It's not for me, having both of those experience, it's the same thing. You
Hmm.
got to get through that first mile. So you get on the bike, and sometimes you're just sluggish, and you're like, God, and then you got like the environment, like what kind of, like, are you dealing with like a flat road? Are you dealing with graded roads? Are you dealing with hills? Is it
Hmm.
windy? I swear to God, the day that we entered Kansas from Nebraska, I felt like I was dealing with headwind for like 50 miles. It took
Hmm.
effort to go downhill.
Oh wow.
Like, yeah, yeah. And I was just cursing at the wind the entire time. But like, you have to just kind of like find where your rhythm is from what is being presented to you from your environment. Um, I learned pretty early on that like angry music wasn't going to help me do it. So I discovered a huge catalog of atmospheric discographies from like bands like Tycho, This Will Destroy You, the album Leaf, just really kind of like at no lyrics, huge crescendos, like just the songs would build and build and build and build and build, and then come down and then build and build and build and build and
Hmm.
build, and like just that repetitive nature helped me get into my breath, helped me get into my body, and it was very, very, very helpful. I don't know what I would have done if I hadn't had Kim teach me a lot of that stuff. She taught me a couple different types of like meditations. One's to calm you down. One's to wake you up. One's to just gather awareness in your mind. One's to like pay attention to your body and what you're doing. And like a lot of people think of meditation is that like you have to just be sitting in silence and with your eyes closed. But I think like once you've done it enough, when you're doing an activity, especially one that's physically exerting that it's good to be in control of your breath.
Yeah, for
And so
sure.
you have to find a way to focus on your breath while you have blisters uh, on your taint, and while you
Yeah.
are going uphill dealing with like 30-mile headwind. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's really, really important to be able to like focus on that. Another thing that I'd like to say, that outside of the physicality of writing and you know, you call it mind control, is that I had like this really amazing epiphany while in Pensacola, Florida. And this is something that I've been kind of like preaching for you know, since that moment in Florida. So like the way that I would approach things in my dialogues with people from Pensacola on were a little bit different from like before. I mentioned it's a really big moment in my book too. And it's we were on these paddle boards. We were being hosted by someone who had also lost her brother when she was 24. All three of us had lost our brothers when we were 24. Her name's Rayla Marie Villanueva, and she took us paddleboarding one afternoon while we were there, because we were in Pensacola for a few days. And the three of us all just decided to like lay on our paddle boards, and we were kind of like in this like triangle, you know, our heads all facing like the center, and we were just like kind of like drifting. And I saw my life as a story. I saw my life as like a narrative being told. Is that like I was into like this beautiful, physically beautiful, mentally beautiful space. I just found this serenity in this moment as we were just drifting on the water. And it occurred to me that like all the pain and all the joy that I ever had in my life, I needed to have in order to get to that moment that I was at,
Mm-hmm.
floating in the water.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I just started like, I was thinking about experience and what is experience. Um, I think when we're in it, our egos need to define it as a positive and negative. And part of that is a survival mechanism for us, because we need to process the experience. We need to process the emotions that come with that experience. And for some reason, maybe a design flaw is that we experience joy very fast and then it moves on. And
Mm-hmm.
we experience grief very slow and it lingers, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, the wellness community, influencers online will always like talk about, oh, it's just a choice. You just have to like make the decision to do this. And they're not completely wrong, but one thing that they don't have in their fine print is the journey one has to go on before they realize that there even is just a choice. You know, you don't just wake up one day after being in pain and be like, oh, it's just a choice not to feel this way. Like, no, you got
Right.
to go on the journey. You've got to experience it. You got to feel it. But what I would say is that, like, when you have suffered a trauma and you've been grieving, when you can get to the point where you can take a step back, you've felt everything that you're going to feel. You've been to hell and back. And when you can take a step back and look at the experience, you can just like, experience doesn't give a fuck about our feelings. The
Mm-mm.
universe, you know, hippies like to talk about nature, but nature can be a savage beast, and the
Right.
universe doesn't care. It just presents us with opportunities. And I just like, I was able in that moment in Pensacola, look at my life and the experience and just ask myself, when I'm able to, when I've gone through my feelings, do I want to look at this experience and be a victim, or do I want to look at the experience and become a student and just ask myself, okay, now what? What am I supposed to do with this? And what you're supposed to do with it is learn and grow. And I think if we don't
Mm-hmm.
allow ourselves, if we don't give ourselves permission to learn and grow from the experience, then we're kind of like destined to like repeat those emotions and those feelings and be kind of like controlled by them until we finally decide that like, hey, I need to learn and grow from this. So, and to like piggyback
Yeah.
off that.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And that's kind of where I was going with the whole mindfulness piece. And yes, meditation is a way that we can also practice mind control and it's all about, like you say, the journey. And that's what I help men with when I work with men. I help them on that journey to get them to where they can see that there is an option, that we don't have
Mm-hmm.
to choose to just look at it like we're a victim, or like shit just keep happening to me. Why am I going to try anything different? And if we don't change anything, nothing's going to change. So you're right. That's a self-fulfilling prophecy. All these things culminate into, I believe, where you and I find ourselves. And of course, we continue to learn. I know I learn every day. I'm sure you continue to learn every day. And that's part of the journey, is learning that you're never done learning. And when the moment you stop is the moment you stop growing, you stop healing, and then the tumble backwards begins. And so we have to continue to grow. And so, yes, I wanted to jump in and tell you that we're totally in alignment with that. And it's hard, you do a 90-second reel, and it's hard to explain you have a choice, but it's going to take a couple of years for you to realize how to work that muscle. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, you definitely, it's how we learn how to make that choice, and how to see the positive in negative things, having a perspective. I had something similar happen to me that you had in your Pensacola experience. And it's a major shift in mindset. And it's where it occurs, and it's like a light bulb turns on. You're like, hang on a damn second. I've been looking at the damn thing the wrong way all this time. And that's what's got me so fucked up with it. And so, yeah, I'm glad you shed some light on that too.
Perspective is first. You could look at one thing, you have to like walk around an object and you can see it for all of its totality. If you look at an object just from one position, you're only seeing it one way. And I would say like, especially like, I hope the message comes clear in my book. And I'm planning on doing a follow-up to my book 2012, which is just going to be more of like a philosophical ideology of like mental health. And to me, it's like the only game in town is self-awareness. I don't care what your like spiritual or religious like belief is. If you don't have a firm understanding or practice of who you are, then you're going to be easily manipulated by others. If I always say that like life is kind of like life in the journey of self-awareness is like kind of like being gifted this map, this treasure map, and on it is a giant X. But if you don't know where you're starting from, how are you going to get to that X? You don't know where you are on that map. And that's what a journey of self-awareness is all about, is understanding who you are, why you do the things that you do. And when I talk about self-awareness, like who are you outside of every single influence? What is the influences in your life? Well, influences are national influences. Influences are racial influences. Influences of your gender identity, your sexual orientation, your family lineage, your close family proximity, your friendships, the state that you live in, the city you live in. All of these are influences, and they're all trying to tell you who you are. Now, there's an importance in all that stuff, but that isn't who you are. Who you are, who your nature is I think one of the most important things. It's your only true job on while you're alive on this planet. Unfortunately, we've all been conned into the idea, into the lifestyle of having to pay in order to exist, and pay bills in order to exist. But that is a job that we have been convinced by the others. Our true job is to discover and understand our nature. And I think the reason why we have such a profound mental health crisis in this country is that the majority of us are going against our nature, because we're being told what it is to live and exist in our society. I think that we need to first understand who we are before we can decide what we want, so that we're not being manipulated and told by other people, this is what you should want, this is how you live, this is how you exist in our society. And as long as you're not hurting anybody, you should be free to find who you are. And it seems like the only time we ever go on a journey of self-discovery is either we suffer a trauma, we find ourselves in therapy, some people find themselves in a yoga class, or we're like, damn it, I need a humanities credit for my major in college. Mm-hmm. And you find yourself in a mythology class, a philosophy class, or an Eastern studies class. And you're like, oh, who am I and why am I here? That question is finally
Right.
raised. And in my early 20s, I used to think it was like, when I was part of the Tin Hat Brigade, I used to think it was nefarious, but, nefarious that like self-awareness isn't something that's promoted in our education. And the older I've gotten, I've realized that it's more of just negligence.
Yeah.
So,
Or, and to, I don't know, I don't want to get too far into conspiracy, but to go a little further, we're no good to them if
exactly.
we know what we want, and it ain't what they need us to do. And the whole debtor system, and how we've
Mm-hmm.
we've got to keep working, we've got to keep providing labor so that we can, as you say, pay to live. Agree with all of that. I totally think, and I've done some reels on, everybody thinks, not everybody, that's too broad of a stroke. So many
Yeah.
people think that the problem is money, and that their
Mm-hmm.
problems are money because they don't have money, therefore they can't they can't pay to live. And I get
Mm-hmm.
that, and I sympathize, and I understand, but I find that that issue is just another symptom
Yep.
of what you're talking about, and not knowing who you are, not knowing what you truly want in life, really just doing what you've been told to do since the beginning. And you're just kind of following somebody else's path, whether it's a parental figure or somebody that you find as a mentor, because they make you feel a certain way in a certain position. You trust all that they have to give you, and all that they have to give you may be misguided. And even
Yeah.
if it's not misguided for them, it's misguiding for you. And we fall into that trap, and we trust that. And I totally was there with you, bro. And I, fixing the issues that have us torn up mentally and emotionally, and I call it spiritually too. I'm quick to decipher not religious, but spiritual,
Yeah.
and trying to find, and that whole piece to me right now, and it's all a work in progress always, but right now for me, what that spiritual piece is the gratitude that I got a shot at living,
Mm-hmm.
and it's such a long shot just to get here as a human being, and I did it, and the humility that goes with all the stuff that's around us. You say you live in Arizona, and some of the more powerful moments I've had, the Grand Canyon and the Red Rocks out there in
Mm-hmm.
Sedona. It's
Yeah.
fucking phenomenal, bro. And it shows you that you ain't nothing. And
Yeah.
compared to all that's going on around us. And then, I live in a beautiful place, and it's full of wildlife, and the animals are everywhere, and the cycles of life, and we see death, and we see birth, and we see growth, and we see moving on, and we see parenting in this microcosm that's animals. And it's like, wow, that there's so
Yeah.
much more than just me. So I got some humility there, and it's so neat that I get to be part of this. And I wouldn't slow down. I've always liked being out in nature, camping and stuff when my kids were little, and that part has stayed true to me. And I think that connection with nature is just such a huge part of our healing and continuing to grow and heal, is being out there, for lack of a better word, where we came from, and
Yeah.
getting getting unplugged, getting back out into that, and just feeling that. And that, I find that to be so huge. I encourage everybody to do that. And in that vein, to that point, so we have, our target audience is men. Just I want to talk about mental health and all that. So I'm targeting people who have gone through traumatic experiences, who have PTSD from war, just all these bad things. And there's there's kind of two phases that we go through. There's the phase where we're laying in the bed and we can't seem to get a handle on things. Everything's so awful. We'll call it the suicidal point. When what's the point? So there's that person, and then there's the person they're sick and tired of being sick and tired. They've taken some steps. They're learning and continuing to learn. So for these two different people, I'd like to give a couple tools for each that you recommend. So for the guy he's stuck, he's whatever he's stuck in, whether it's guilt and shame, whether it's depression from a traumatic event, whatever it may be. What are some things that you throw out there, like because I know you're in the field right away? What do you need to focus on to see if you can't get some positive momentum going and get some wind in your sail?
Oh, two things right off the bat that came to me is just like doing a basic like meditation in the morning and at night, just like getting the practice of like deep breathing. Inhale through the nose slowly, and not don't fill your chest with lungs. You kind of like envision, even though the air is going in your lungs, you kind of envision that it's going into your stomach, and your stomach expands, and then you hold it for about a beat, and then when you exhale, you exhale through your mouth. And when you feel like any type of tension, just stop. Whether it's anxiety in your mind or in your body, you just stop and you do that for about um, you know 2 minutes. Even just do that. And if you have to stop like a few times an hour to do that, then do that a few times an hour. It's just like a great little meditation to like get you in touch with your body, recognizing the stress, owning the stress, and then breathing and just allowing yourself to, like, because those slow methodical breaths will help your nervous system relax just a little bit. Another thing that I do is I have a reminder on my phone that goes off like at 9 in the morning, or 7 in the morning, and then at 10 o'clock at night. And it just every single day it goes off and it asks me. I wrote in a question for my phone to ask me, "What are you grateful for?"
Mhm.
And I think it's
Gratitude.
like really important to like you're kind of hacking your mind at that much as like I don't like the biohacking bros of the world. It is kind of like a hacking your mind in a way, because you're forcing yourself to say things that are good in your life. And I start with my body. I may wear glasses, but I'm grateful that I have both my eyes.
Sure.
Like I'm grateful that I have my limbs. I start small there. Like I start with my body,
Sure.
and then I go into the people that I do have in my life. Like I'm grateful for my partner Sharon. I'm grateful for that I have one of my parents still on this planet. I'm grateful for the job that I have. I'm grateful that I have a roof over my head. I'm grateful that I have food. I'm grateful that I have the ability to write. Just simple things that like try to think of like the things that you do on a daily basis that like, man, if that one little element was tweaked or taken away, how much more difficult that would make. That's just another obstacle that you have to like learn
Hmm.
and deal with. So be grateful that you have it. Like
Hmm.
I have had back problems, and I had to have back surgery. This was after the bike ride. Um, where I was like on and off of a cane and on in and out of a wheelchair for a few months. And when you have to have your partner wash your butthole,
Whew,
that's humbling.
that is humbling.
You
Yeah.
know, so I'm super grateful every single day that I'm able to like stand on my 2 feet
Yeah.
without assistance.
Yeah.
So I think that just kind of like it forces you to look at every single small minute detail in your life. And I feel like when you have gratitude in your heart, it kind of like it changes. It'll slowly change you. And these things that I'm telling you, they're not a quick fix. You're not going to
Sure.
just do it one time or one day and you're healed. Like, no, there's a reason why they call it a practice.
Hmm.
All right. You
Hmm.
to do it on a daily basis, so that when you do, the whole idea with like a gratitude practice is that like when you do run into something and you get pissed off about it, be mad, be angry, but then go back to your gratitude, go back to your breath. Like, what are you, okay, this just happened to you and it sucks, but like remember the things that are still good, and then get
Hmm.
into your breath and breathe and be, pay attention to your breath and slow everything down, get that heart rate down, all that. So those are just two things that I think that
Yeah.
if you have a practice of that like give yourself 3 months and you'll see any changes. You'll see some positive changes.
Yeah. I'm sure both those would. Both those are great. Gratitude's huge. And for anybody listening, Thomas just reeled off some things in his life that he's grateful for. And I understand. I talk to men every single day. They got some really bad circumstances, and I get it. But simply having the opportunity to make a choice about doing this or that. So I'm thinking about a homeless person right now. They have a
Yeah.
choice. They woke up, so they had a choice. That's an opportunity. That's something to be grateful for, and build from there. And then
Mm-hmm.
you start, like you say, you're pointing out the growth that you're making, and you're recognizing that. So those are great. Those are a couple great tools. Do you have, when it comes to breath work, I know Wim Hof is kind of the name brand that goes with everybody. Do you have any other suggestions of going on YouTube to get some guided breath work or guided meditations? Or is that something that you did? Was you used guided, or you just read some books about meditation? How did your
I just
meditation journey go?
it was a lot of the stuff that like Kim taught me. I've read Wim Hof's like main book, and I've done some of that. So like, the fast deep breathing is an intense.
Mm-hmm.
You're still breathing deep, so it's not as fast as it could be. Like those shallow deep breaths, or those shallow fast breathing. That like I have a lot of energy, so I don't need that. That's like usually something you could do to wake yourself up. I don't need that. I got too much energy up here. I need to bring it
Mm-hmm.
down.
Yeah.
So most of everything that I do is all about like finding calm and center. Sharon makes fun of me. She calls me Coffee Brown sometimes because as soon as my feet hit the floor, like I'm awake. And
I'm the
it doesn't
same
matter
way.
how groggy, I just like I'm up, and she's like it takes her like an hour to adjust from sleeping to waking life. So I just like think like any type of like breathing. There's a lot of different things where like you plug one side of your nose, you breathe through a nostril,
Yep.
and then you switch that
Mm-hmm.
up. But I think like just I did like I a lot of stuff came from. But then like when it comes to like anything on YouTube, it's more of meditative music. Like I'll put that on when I have to go to
Mm-hmm.
bed at night. There is one funny meditation. I think it's like 5 minutes long, but if you look for the "fuck that" meditation on
Yeah.
YouTube, it's just
Yeah.
like this real soft voice being like, "Fuck all that bullshit." Just when somebody is mean to you, just take a deep breath and realize they can go fuck themselves. It's just,
I like
it's
that.
like
Yeah.
stuff like it was hilarious. So I think I'm a big laugher. I I I think people forget sometimes the medicine of laughter. I'm pretty dark too. Like I have a very 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 dark sense of humor. I think like but I think that's come from my therapy and from my meditation, that like I can be going through some heavy shit and I can still laugh at it. And it's like I
Mm-hmm.
need to. And laughter, I think, is just like some of the best medicine in the world. And if you can get people to laugh at themselves or at the situation they're in, it's not laughing to ignore it. It's not laughing to escape from it. It's laughing in spite of it.
Yeah.
So like
I like
there's
that.
there's some people. I've never gone to like a laughing meditation where people do fake laughs and they try to like get themselves. Like I just think about like wild shit I've done and I'll just start laughing. I sometimes even communicate to my staff at work in movie dialogue. They have no idea what's happening. I do, and it tickles me. So I think laughter is some of the most powerful unutilized medicine that we have in our society, and it's important to do. Like I find myself laughing all the time. I haven't done it very much here, but trust me, I love to laugh. I think that chemically changes when you're in a state where like you just are laughing your ass off.
Yeah, and I think it's also a physical release. Crying's good
Yeah.
for us too. Same reason.
Hmm.
Good physical
I
release.
love.
There's breath work that goes with crying. There's mimicking
Yeah,
the breath work that goes with crying to kind of get you to calm down, because that's our body's natural way. Our body can do some awesome stuff. The
it's
more I learn,
amazing
about it, it's amazing what it can do,
if we
and it
just
can
get
calm
out of its
itself down
way.
through breath. I know we get so wrapped around the axles on the dumbest shit, and I think that laughing at a situation, as you were saying that, it also helps with that perspective piece. And look, man, we're all still standing here. Nobody's dead, so it doesn't matter how
Yeah.
shitty the situation is. We've still got an opportunity. Back to the gratitude. So I appreciate that. Well,
Don't.
Thomas, I'm really appreciative, and I'm going to be sharing your website, risephoenix.org, in the description section of this episode. And of course, everyone needs to check your book out, which is titled 2012: A Bicycle Odyssey. And can you tell our listeners what they're going to find at your website? And also, if there's anything else you'd like to share, anything you got going on currently? I know you mentioned maybe writing another book. And so anything you got going on in the future that you'd like to share?
Yeah, risephoenix.org. You can find my book, 2012, A Bicycle Odyssey, a 7,000-mile bicycle journey for suicide awareness and the healing power of art. I'm very proud of that. While that's a book I feel like I needed to write, I'm working on two different projects of what I really want to write. One
Mm-hmm.
is a modern science fiction, which still is the main theme is self-awareness. And then I'm doing a follow up to 2012, which is all the things. It's probably going to be a much shorter book, probably about 100 pages, but it's just going to be the Rise philosophy and about art, creativity, and what is going on with our mental health here in this country. I can only speak for America because this is where I live. And then I also have I have two podcasts. One I haven't done in a while, but there's over 300 conversations on there. That one's called Inner Monologue. I plan on getting back to that after I do about a half a year's worth of touring my book around and
Mm-hmm.
talking about it. And then another one is called Stages. I started that after about 6 months after my mom died. It's just talking about the different stages of grief, the different stages of life, and that one's
Mm-hmm.
much more of like an audio diary. I'll just sit and hit the record button and ramble for about 20 minutes, just talking about um, uh, my own aging process, dealing with my father, and all that stuff. So all of that, including our social media, can be found on risephoenix.org.
Outstanding. I encourage everybody to go check that out. We're both so appreciative of everybody listening for giving us your time. I hope we added some value, and we'll see you guys next time. Thanks again, Thomas.
Awesome. I appreciate you, Aaron.